My name is Michael Pelletier. I am the Executive Director of the Institute for Global Engagement here at the University of Houston, for those of you who haven't met me. I started at the University of Houston 3 years ago. I was the U.S. Ambassador to Madagascar and Comoros and retired from the Foreign Service and came here to Houston to continue to do global engagement, but from a university and higher ed aspect rather than from a U.S. diplomacy aspect. And as soon as I got to the University of Houston, I looked around, I met so many wonderful colleagues and students and faculty and staff, and I went and I met with the provost and the president, and I said, you've hired me to do the easiest job in the world, because if my job is to make University of Houston globally engaged, you all have already achieved that goal, because the University of Houston is so incredibly globally engaged. And so we thought that it would be kind of hopefully fun and hopefully an interesting way to highlight just how many ways there are to be globally engaged at the University of Houston by organizing this morning's Cougs Without Borders event, where we will have different presentations about some of the different ways to be globally engaged, and where you will see different offices, different partners in global engagement across the university set up around the room, including our amazing colleagues at ISSO, the International Student Service Organization office, but also posters and some installations from some of our learning abroad experiences, and you will hear from faculty, students, and staff about some of the wonderful ways in which they have helped the University of Houston to be globally engaged. My team teases me a little bit, and the provost teases me a lot, because I like to say we have over 47,000 students now at the University of Houston. And so I say that means there are over 47,000 ways to be globally engaged, because each student brings their own perspective, their own reality, their own experience, and their own challenges to being globally engaged. And our office likes to help them and to help all of the different colleges and departments and institutes across the University of Houston to figure out pathways for each of those 47,000 students. I say the provost teases me because she says, you're not going to get a budget for 47,000 individual programs, and I understand that. But we also understand that everybody's reality is different, and what everyone brings to the table is different and is incredibly valuable. And how do we help the university provide the support to all of those students so that they can be globally engaged? And I just want to say a few words about why it is important to be globally engaged. The one more obvious and one perhaps less obvious. The more obvious one is because the world is now global. And every job, every reality, every life you are going to live is going to involve engagement with the rest of the world. COVID taught us many things, positive and negative, but one of the things it taught us was suddenly global supply chains didn't work so well and people were hoarding toilet paper. Global matters. It matters even if you have no intention of ever leaving this wonderful city of Houston, because supply chains are now global. So every job, every life you live is going to have something to do with what's going on in the rest of the world. And we want our students to be prepared for that. We want our students to be prepared to get those amazing globally engaged jobs that are out there, and to be able to brag to employers that when we graduate from the University of Houston, we are ready to work in a global setting, in a cross-cultural, intercultural setting, wherever you need us. The less obvious reason why I think it is important to be global engaged is a little more philosophical. And that is because I have found through my own experience, through my learning abroad, through my work abroad, that the best way to appreciate yourself and to understand yourself and your own culture is to engage with other cultures and other languages, and to realize that there is something that is very true and inner to you, but there is also another way of being. There are other ways of expressing reality. There are other ways, other languages, traditions, and cultures with which to engage the world. And I think that teaches us all both a wonderful humility, but also a wonderful flexibility and a wonderful ability to really engage with the world and solve whatever problems and challenges the world throws at us. And so today, this afternoon, morning, afternoon, we hope to highlight some of the ways in which the University of Houston provides programs and courses and experiences and opportunities for students to be globally engaged, whether that is by traveling around the world on some of the amazing learning abroad programs, whether it's by traveling around the world right in your own classroom through online collaborative international learning, whether it is traveling around the world without ever leaving Houston and going to some of the amazing programs across the city of Houston, never mind the amazing programs right here at the University of Houston, and through working with our amazing faculty who do so much interesting research and partnership with countries and professors and colleagues and businesses all around the world. So there are indeed 47,000 ways, next year I'm gonna have to say 48,000 ways, for a COOG to be globally engaged. And we hope this morning to highlight some of those. What we've done is organized it to be very free flow. So we'll have some opportunities for people to come up and share their experiences with you, and then we'll take a bit of a break between each panel, and you're invited to visit some of the different tables, some of the different poster shows, see what some of the COOGs are doing, and talk to some of our team who are here to help you. We have everybody, I think, from the Institute for Global Engagement staff here, from our Learning Abroad staff, our Global Partnerships staff, our Global Programming staff, including Stacy Michael, who put together this afternoon's event for us, thank you, as well as Dr. Maggie Mahoney and myself, from the leadership of the Institute. So please corner us, ask questions, look around, appreciate what you and your colleagues have done, ask questions of the panelists, eat some food, drink some lemonade so you keep this terrible cold that's going around the city away from you, and think about how you and your friends and your colleagues and your staff and your students can become globally engaged. So with that, thank you again for coming. And let me invite my colleague, Dr. Maggie Mahoney, to come up and get us started with Dr. Melody Lee and Dr. Stella Gregorian, who can talk about some of the internationalization efforts we have right here at home. Thank you.
My name is Maggie Mahoney. I am the Director of Global Engagement here at the university. And I'm so pleased to be joined by two incredible women. I always look up to other women and the ways that they lead. So Dr. Melody Lee is a faculty member in the Modern and Classical Languages Department teaching Chinese studies. And Dr. Stella Gregorian is in the Department of Sociology. And I don't want to actually speak on your expertise, like what your area.
Right now it's food and culture.
Food, that's right, thank you, food and culture. So today we're going to talk about internationalizing at home. You are also, again, encouraged and allowed to get up and go eat some food and go see some posters and to text your friends and colleagues to also pop in and pop out today. So internationalization at home is what we're gonna kind of touch on, and there are a lot of ways to do that. There's global research that happens right here in the University of Houston. There's our Global Citizens Credential, and taking global courses, taking language courses, maybe participating in a global internship or fellowship. But today we're going to focus on how do we cross borders without leaving our classrooms. Collaborative Online International Learning, COIL is what we call it. COIL is a way for us to take classes with other students, to teach courses with other faculty, all using the internet and using online and technology resources. So I'd love for both of you to introduce your programs a little bit. How are they supported? Where did you get, funding from maybe, or do you need it? Can you tell us a little bit about your programs real quick, and then we'll ask about about them.
Okay, I will go ahead and start. So just a little promotion. So the class that I actually taught with COIL grant is like the CHINWCL3342 East Asian Cities. It's called Tales of East Asian Cities. This is amazing class. So if you have students in the spring, I'm teaching this again in the spring. I'm very fortunate to get the COIL grant last round, and then we have because of the grants that we were able to collaborate with National Taiwan University in Taipei. So we have incorporated a lot of collaborations, like including we have invited guest lectures to give us like guest lectures online. We also have done a lot of collaborations with the East Asian Cities class, actually in Taipei Normal University. And the professor and I actually co-tour some of the sections. Like he's an expert on Taiwan, so he took over some of the Taiwan sections, whereas I took over some of the Hong Kong, Shanghai sections. One of the highlight of our projects is also that we actually group our students with their students because, of the time zone. We can talk about a challenge a little more later, but like we actually have a lot of asynchronous collaboration, including having the students there really giving virtual tour of my students, because a lot of our students were not able to travel abroad to the study abroad program during the COVID. So we were able to really have those students give virtual tours through cameras on their own time. So they got this real life experience, and they also got to know that their life experience in Taiwan is actually different from what they learned or what they read. So that's very meaningful.
And Melody, did you focus just on Taipei and Taiwan, or was it focused on other countries or cities?
Yeah, so this East Asian Cities class actually mainly covers 6 cities in East Asia, including Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Taipei, Tokyo, and Seoul. We did add Houston, since we are based in Houston. So we have the students, one of the highlights of our collaborative projects is actually have the 2 classes grouped together, and eventually all of them were grouped together to these 7 cities, and they built a virtual reality space through spatial. You probably see some of the images from the slideshow. So they did an incredible job to really showcase what we could do through revisualizing this space through what they learned in class and their imagination.
That's incredible. So they got to actually take courses with other students, and we'll get back to the synchronous part of that. That's impressive. So Stella, Dr. Gregorian, can you tell us a little bit about your program as well?
Sure. And since Melody started with a advertising campaign, I too, for the spring, I'll be teaching the sociology of food class. This is the premier class that we connect students with students abroad. But also in the summer, for people who are interested, or you can spread the word, we have Global Houston being offered in sociology, and that's a tour throughout different areas in Houston where we talk about immigration patterns to Houston, and we do it through food. So we go to restaurants, we go to farmers markets, we go to all kinds of places where there's an immigrant international element, and the students have a blast. So make sure, advertise that. But in regards to COIL, which I too was fortunate enough to get a small grant through COIL, to help enhance what I'd already started doing in my classes, in my food classes, and that was connecting my sociology students with sociology students at Yerevan State University in Armenia. And so the sociology program there, my colleague Yuliana Melkomyan was very interested to connect our students together. And so we came up with a plan where we would have something mutual, some reading, some interactive website, and we would then spend a week or 2 on it, and then we would meet online. And the students would discuss the topic based on information that they had. Their class was a sociology of migration class, so there was this wonderful overlap of food and migration, but these are sociology students who were trying to communicate with one another, and last year when we did it, we didn't do it in spring, but we did it in the fall. It was really a success. So as we talk, I can give you more details about that.
So I think the only other question I'd love to share, and then we'll be able to kind of get together and talk about this one-on-one. What were the ways that you had to cross borders and deal with challenges and go across boundaries to be able to make this happen? What was challenging to be able to put this together from your perspective as faculty, but also for from the student perspective?
Yeah, so I can start. So I think one of the biggest challenge to work with like a different time zone of like 13-hour time zone. So it's really difficult to get the synchronous collaboration in that way. We had to move some of the classes like to the evening time. So I deliberately set the class like late afternoon already. So we moved some of the classes late evening, like in early evening time, and then the Taiwan students had to get up really early for that. But the students were really cooperative, like really accommodating, and because of the wonderful experience, they were able to do that. So we did like some of the sections that way to get the synchronous, like online collaboration. But the most important part is we actually had to build in a lot of synchronous collaboration. Like I mentioned, we grouped the students in their own groups so they can meet on their own time to do the virtual live stream. They also work, we have a lot of collaborated tools like Google Forms, Padlet, virtual tools like Spatial, so they can work on their own time and track each other's progress. But still, you can see like what every person does. We make group leaders of each side, like the Taiwan side and the Houston side, so then we can keep track of they can also be in charge of their own group. So, but it was challenging for the time difference, but we were able to navigate it through different ways of collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melody.
Yeah, I agree with Melody. The time issue was hard and quite challenging. One thing I was talking to Melody about, the students in Armenia were a bit more flexible than our students to meet at a later time, either early in the morning or very late at night to accommodate a 11-hour difference. So that help matters because they weren't as rigid and in their time as our students were. Plus, there was a time issue where we organized our courses at a different interval. So it was virtually impossible to do it during a course time because we would have scheduled our courses at a totally different time during the year than they had. But it worked out. But my biggest challenge ended up being language. And we, with my partner, Dr. Melkomian, who is fluent in English, and I'm fluent in Armenian, we came up with a plan where we'd have groups, and she populated her groups with strong English speakers, so she made sure that there were English speakers in each group. And then I did a kind of a spiel with my students, I started off with, we're at an advantage, we're gonna do this in English, they're at a disadvantage, and speak slowly and explain concepts before you move on in the virtual online meetings. But very quickly, our students would start talking, and then they wouldn't stop, or they would say stuff like, we were at a tailgate the other day, and they would just keep going on, and I'd say, hey, Armenia, do you know what tailgate is? And they'd go like, no. Or they would say something that they had translated into sort of a different kind of English, and I knew what they were saying because I knew the Armenian word for it, and their instructor would say, hey, US, do you know what they mean by this? Like it was home trade. And my students thought they're like trading homes, literally. And what they had meant was home economics or all the factors that go into having a household. And this kind of derailed the conversation for a while until Dr. Melkomian stepped in. But what happened was that eventually as we would step in, students got used to that. And we would translate because we knew there were problems, but then we would also interject more things, which might not have been what the students were deciding to talk about. So we had to curtail how we were talking. So language was an issue all the time. And the last thing I'm going to say about language, though, something my students learned and I learned. So this is the beauty of this international collaboration. We learned things as well. Was that I had started by saying we're at an advantage and the Armenians are at a disadvantage. And then I was reminded that perhaps it's the Americans who are at a disadvantage because literally they only knew English. I had a few students who knew a little bit of Spanish, and that semester there weren't really many who were speaking another language. But the Armenians knew English well enough, maybe not to talk to Houstonians, but well enough. They all know, or most of them knew fluent Russian, they know Arabic, they know Farsi, they know French, so they were like, you sure we're at a disadvantage? Maybe you guys are at a disadvantage that you only speak in one language. And this was a great opportunity for us to talk about international communication when language is a barrier. What do we expect from someone at the table to have a seat at the table? What is the language? And so that was a really good, interesting discussion.
Wonderful. Well, one of the big takeaways of this is internationalization at home or going global right here in Houston is definitely possible. And so from a faculty perspective, putting COIL into your classes, Collaborative Online International Learning, getting grants like they both received from the Texas International Education Consortium, supported by our office, can help create these opportunities for students who get to learn without needing to leave Houston. Maybe that fits with their work schedule, maybe that fits with their finances. There's just so many opportunities for students to be able to go global right here in Houston, and COIL is just one of the great examples of it. So I'm going to thank you both for talking about that with us. And so now, as part of Cougs Without Borders, we hope that you would come and walk around and see posters, meet some of our Institute for Global Engagement team, but also come talk to faculty like Melody and Stella, Dr. Lee and Dr. Gregorian about the opportunities that they've had, how they've done it, or maybe even for students to come talk to them about what their students got from this experience. So again, I invite you to grab some food and have some conversations, and we'll join you back here in about 10 minutes for our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.